A pregnant single mother begged a millionaire to save leftovers, but his proposal changed everything. An unexpected love was born and transformed their lives forever. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe, like, and comment on where you are watching from. The persistent drizzle fell lightly that June night, turning Main Street into a blur of neon lights reflected on the wet asphalt. Sarah Johnson, 28 years old and 7 months pregnant, struggled to walk along the sidewalk of Essence Bistro, one of the most upscale restaurants in the area. Her swollen feet protested inside worn-out sneakers that no longer fit properly, and the thin second-hand coat she had found at a thrift store provided little warmth against the damp cold that penetrated to her bones. Sarah was not the type of woman who was born to ask for help. Raised by her grandmother in Springfield, Missouri, she had learned early on that dignity and hard work were the only assets no one could steal. Grandma Betty, her grandmother, was known throughout the region for her cornbread and cornbread cakes that she sold at local fairs, and it was from her that Sarah inherited her culinary talent and that stubborn pride that now hurt more than her heavy belly. 3 months ago, her life had crumbled like a house of cards. David, the father of the baby and her partner for 5 years, had disappeared, taking the $23,000 they had saved for years to open a small restaurant in Little Italy. Along with the money, he took their dreams, their trust, and left only doubts and an overdue rent bill that resulted in eviction. Now, standing in front of the dumpster behind Essence, Sarah could smell fine food mixed with the acrid odor of wet garbage. Her hands trembled. She didn't know if it was from the cold, the hunger, or the absolute shame of what she was about to do. Inside her belly, the baby moved, as if to remind her that it was no longer just about her pride, her wounded dignity. She approached the large metal dumpster, lifted the lid with a metallic creak that seemed to echo louder than it should. Inside, white cardboard containers held food scraps that were insignificant leftovers for the restaurant's customers, but represented precious meals for her. A half-grilled salmon, roasted potatoes still with rosemary, a portion of risotto that someone had barely touched. "What are you doing?" The male voice made her jump, dropping one of the containers onto the wet ground. Sarah turned abruptly, her heart racing, and saw a tall man standing a few feet away. He held a black umbrella with a wooden handle and wore a navy blue suit that, even in the dim light behind the restaurant, was visibly expensive. He looked to be around 35, with black hair and a few grey strands at his temples, a square jaw, and dark brown eyes that watched her with an intensity that made her want to disappear. I was... Sarah felt the tears burning, but she forced them down. She wasn't going to cry, not in front of a stranger. She had already lost too much, but she still had this. "I'm sorry. I'll leave." She began to walk away, but the man took 2 steps forward. His Italian shoes sank slightly into the puddle, splashing dirty water onto the impeccable hem of his pants. "Wait." It was not a request. It was a gentle command. "Are you looking for food?" Sarah closed her eyes. The humiliation was an internal burn, consuming what was left of her self-esteem. But the baby moved again, stronger this time, and she opened her eyes, lifted her chin, and faced the man directly. "Please don't throw away the leftovers. Save them for me." The words came out in a thread of voice, but they came out. "I'll come back every day if you let me. I won't make a mess, I promise. I just need a little food." The man remained silent for long seconds that felt like hours. Sarah could feel the weight of his gaze, evaluating, judging. She waited for the reprimand, waited for him to call security, waited to be chased away like a stray animal. "What's your name?" he finally asked. "Sarah." "Sarah, my name is Michael Thompson. I'm the owner of this restaurant." He paused, his eyes briefly dropping to her prominent belly, And of 11 more here in Springfield, I have a better proposal than saving leftovers for you." Sarah blinked, confused. "Proposal? Work for me." The words hung in the humid night air like something surreal. Sarah took a step back, the automatic distrust of someone who had been deceived too many times. I'm not that kind of woman, if that's what you're thinking." Her voice came out harsher than she intended, defensive. Michael frowned, then understood. An expression of something like pain crossed his face. "No, it's nothing like that." He ran his free hand through his hair, slightly tousling it. "I saw your hands. Before you got startled and dropped the container, I saw how you were sorting the food. You weren't just scavenging, you were evaluating. You looked at the salmon and turned it in a specific way, like someone used to working with fish. You have calluses on your fingers, burned scars on the back of your left hand. You're a cook." Sarah looked at her own hands, surprised. It was true, years of working in restaurants and diners had left their marks. But she hadn't expected someone, especially someone like him, to notice those details. I was a cook." The correction came out bitter. "Now I'm just a pregnant woman looking for food." Trash. It doesn't have to be. Michael took another step forward, and this time Sarah didn't back away. "Look, I don't know your whole story, and you don't have to tell me, if you don't want to. But I have an empty apartment above this restaurant. It was a storage space, but it's basically clean now. It has a bathroom, an area where you can put a stove, a bed. You can live there." "I can't afford rent." Sarah hated how small and defeated her voice sounded. "I'm not asking for rent." Michael held the umbrella more firmly as the rain began to pour harder. "I'm offering you a place to stay until the baby is born and you recover. Then, when you're ready, you can work in my kitchen. The head chef is a pretentious Frenchman who makes technically perfect food but lacks soul. I need someone who cooks with heart, who brings real flavor. Can you do that?" Sarah felt something break inside her, the last barrier of pride that kept her from accepting that she needed help. "My grandma taught me how to cook." The words came out through sobs she could no longer control. "She made the best treats in Springfield. Cornbread, cakes, cheese puffs. I learned everything from her. Then I came to Chicago and worked in a buffet restaurant, a diner, a cafeteria. I know how to cook real food, food that feeds the soul. But I don't know if I can anymore. I don't know if I'm good enough for a place like this. Let me be the judge of that." Michael handed her the umbrella without ceremony, picking up the trash bags she had dropped. "Come on, I'll show you the apartment. And then you're going to eat something warm and decent, not garbage. Sounds fair?" Sarah took the umbrella with trembling hands. The wooden handle was still warm from his touch. "Why are you doing this?" she had to ask. "You don't know me. I could be anything. It could be a scam. It could be a lie." Michael stopped halfway to the back door and turned to her. The light from the outdoor lamp illuminated half of his face, leaving the other half in shadows. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something ancient, something painful. "Because 20 years ago, my mother was exactly where you are now." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Pregnant, alone, without money. And no one offered her help. No one. She struggled, worked until she couldn't anymore, and when she got sick, it was too late. I was 16 when she died, Sarah, 16 years old and one certainty. If I had the chance to go back in time and help her, I would do anything. Anything. But I can't. So when I see someone in the same situation, someone who needs a chance, a breath, I offer. It's not charity. It's a debt I owe to the universe. Sarah stood still, processing those words. There was truth in them, a raw pain she recognized. because she carried similar burdens, and that was it, more than anything else, that made her follow Michael Thompson into that restaurant on that rainy June night. What she didn't know was that this encounter in the back of a sophisticated restaurant on the boulevard, between a pregnant woman searching for scraps and a businessman carrying ghosts from the past, would change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. It was just the beginning of a story of redemption, love, and second chances that would test every fiber of courage and pride they both possessed. The apartment above the restaurant smelled of mold and old paint when Michael opened the heavy wooden door. Sarah stepped in hesitantly, still holding the dripping umbrella, and what she saw made her swallow hard. It wasn't exactly the storage space he had described. It was worse and better at the same time. The space was large, maybe about 500 square feet, with high ceilings and a huge window overlooking a quieter side street. But it was completely empty, except for a few cardboard boxes stacked in a corner and a bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling that flickered intermittently. The hardwood floor was dusty but intact. The peeling walls revealed layers of paint from different decades: faded blue, aqua green, yellowish beige. I know it doesn't look like much right now. Michael flipped a different switch, and 2 more lights turned on, better illuminating the space. But it has good structure. The plumbing works, the electrical wiring was redone 2 years ago when we renovated the restaurant. There's a bathroom over there. He pointed to a door at the back. Shower, toilet, sink, everything works. Sarah walked slowly through the space, her footsteps echoing. In the empty room, her hands instinctively went to her belly, as if she wanted to protect the baby even there, in that place that could be a refuge or just another disappointment. "And the kitchen?" she asked, her voice still laden with self-preserving distrust. "There's no kitchen set up, but there are hookups for a stove and refrigerator over there." Michael indicated a wall where there were gas outlets and appropriate outlets. "I have a 4-burner stove in the main storage from a restaurant I closed last year, and a small refrigerator that we're not using. I can bring it tomorrow." Sarah turned to him, her eyes misty but her voice firm. "And how much do you want in return? Because nothing in this life is free. I learned that the hard way." Michael sighed, leaning against the doorframe. He took off his wet blazer and hung it on a nail that protruded from the wall. Underneath, he wore a white shirt that hugged the broad shoulders of someone who regularly worked out. "I understand your distrust, Sarah. I swear I do." He crossed his arms, choosing his words carefully. "The agreement is simple. You live here rent-free with all utilities included. Water, electricity, gas, everything. You have the baby, take your time to recover. When you feel ready, and only when you feel ready, you start working in the restaurant kitchen. Business hours, 6 hours a day to start, with all labor rights, official employment, health insurance, retirement fund, transportation allowance, meal vouchers. A junior cook's salary to begin with, $3,000. If you're as good as I think you are, we'll renegotiate in 3 months. Sarah did the math in her head. 3,000 was more than she earned before at the buffet restaurant where she worked 12 hours a day without benefits. It was more than she expected to earn anywhere, especially as a newly single mother. "Why me?" The question came out almost as a whisper. "There are 1,000 cooks in New York looking for jobs. Why take a chance on me?" Michael was silent for a moment, his gaze distant, as if he were seeing something far beyond those peeling walls. "Because I saw in your hands the same thing I saw in my mother's hands." He turned his gaze back to her, and Sarah saw a raw vulnerability there that she hadn't expected to find in such an obviously successful man. "My mother's name was Teresa Thompson. She was a cook too, working at parties, weddings, events. She made the best pastries in New York, everyone said so, but she never managed to have her own business, never achieved stability. When I was 14, she started having heart problems. The doctors said it was stress, overwork, poor nutrition, because she always made sure I ate well, but she only had the basics. He ran his hand over his face as if the gesture could erase the painful memories. She tried to keep working, but it became increasingly difficult. She asked for help from her employers, from family, from anyone she could, but her pride... He gave a sad smile. Her pride was greater than anything. She wouldn't accept help that felt like charity. She wanted to work, she wanted dignity, so she pushed beyond her limits until her body just gave up. I was 16 when she passed, Sarah, 16 years old, and a promise I made at her funeral. If I could grow, have something, I would never let anyone go through what she went through, not if I could help it. Sarah felt the tears finally escape, rolling warm down her cold cheeks, because she understood. She understood that pride, that refusal to accept charity, that desperate desire to maintain dignity even when everything else was crumbling. "I'm so sorry." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "For your mother, and thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance when I don't even know if I deserve it." "You deserve it, Sarah." Michael stepped closer, maintaining a respectful distance. "And you don't need to thank me. Just promise me one thing. If you need anything, anything at all, whether it's medicine for the baby, help carrying something heavy, or just someone to talk to, you ask. No shame, no guilt. Promise." Sarah hesitated. Promising to ask for help went against every survival instinct she had developed. But she looked at her belly, felt the baby move, and thought that maybe, just maybe, it was time to learn that strength also meant knowing when to accept support. "I promised to try." It was the most honest she could be. Michael nodded, seeming satisfied with that. "Then it's settled. Now come downstairs with me, I'll get you some real food. And tomorrow I'll bring the furniture and we'll start turning this place into a home." 2 hours later, Sarah was sitting at a discreet table in the back of the kitchen at Essence Bistro, eating the best mushroom risotto she had ever tasted in her life. Michael had asked the chef on duty to prepare a special dish, and now he watched as she ate with the hunger of someone who had spent days eating poorly. "Is it good?" he asked, sitting across from her with a cup of coffee. "It's perfect." Sarah wiped her mouth with the cloth napkin, still not used to that level of refinement. "The cream is just right, the mushrooms still have texture, the parmesan is of good quality, but..." Michael leaned forward, genuinely interested. "It's missing soul," Sarah said, and immediately regretted it, biting her lip. "Sorry, I didn't mean to criticize. It's delicious, really." No. Michael gestured for her to continue. "Explain that to me. What do you mean by missing soul?" Sarah looked at the plate, choosing her words. "It's technically perfect, I know that. But it's as if it were made by a machine, you know. Everything is measured, timed, following the recipe to the letter. But good food that touches people, needs to have the seasoning that isn't in any recipe. It needs to have history, memory, affection. My grandmother used to say that when you cook with anger, the food turns bitter. When you cook in a hurry, it lacks grace. But when you cook with love, even the simplest ingredients become something special." Michael was silent for long seconds, then smiled, the first genuine smile Sarah had seen from him. It completely transformed his face, taking years off his serious appearance and making small wrinkles appear at the corners of his eyes. "You just put into words something I felt but couldn't explain." He lightly tapped the table. "That's exactly what's missing in my restaurants. Technical perfection everyone can achieve with training, but soul, history, affection, that can't be taught. Either you have it or you don't. And do you think I have it? Sarah, she asked, vulnerable. I bet my reputation that you do. At that moment, a tall woman burst into the kitchen like a hurricane. She was around 40, with brown hair neatly tied in a bun, wearing a blue medical coat under a black leather jacket. Her eyes were strikingly similar to Michael's, the same brown color, the same intensity. Rafa, I've been trying to call you for an hour. She stopped abruptly upon seeing Sarah. Oh, sorry, I didn't know you. I had company. Michael stood up, gesturing between the two. Sarah, this hurricane is my sister, Dr. Beatrice Thompson. This is Sarah. She'll be working here at the restaurant. Beatrice studied Sarah with that clinical gaze that doctors develop, picking up details that most people wouldn't notice. Her eyes dropped to Sarah's belly, noticed the wet coat hanging on the chair beside her, the hands of a worker, the deep fatigue marked under her eyes. Nice to meet you, Sarah. Beatrice extended her hand, the grip firm yet gentle. Are you okay? You look exhausted. I'm fine, thank you. Sarah shook her hand, suddenly feeling exposed under that analytical gaze. B is an obstetrician, Michael explained, and Sarah saw something pass between the siblings, a silent communication. She works at St. Luke's Hospital nearby. When is your due date? Beatrice asked, already in professional mode. End of August, Sarah replied, uncomfortable with the attention. Are you getting prenatal care? The silence that followed was answer enough. Beatrice and Michael exchanged another look. All right. Beatrice pulled up a chair and sat next to Sarah with the ease of someone used to dealing with reluctant patients. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, you're coming to my office. I'm going to do a complete evaluation, see how the baby is doing, request the necessary tests, and before you say you can't afford it, let me be clear. You will be my patient, and I don't charge family members. And you, working for my brother, are family now. Sarah felt her throat tighten again. It was too much, all that kindness, all that help. Part of her still expected to find out what the catch was, what the real price of all this was. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Beatrice placed her hand over hers on the table. You just need to show up tomorrow at 9 in the morning. Michael, write down the address for her. Michael was already typing on his phone. I just sent the location via WhatsApp. He looked at Sarah. Do you have a cell phone? Sarah nodded, pulling out her old cracked device from her pocket. Seconds later, the message arrived. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Michael insisted on calling an Uber to take her to the shelter where she was staying. She didn't mention that the shelter was actually a bench at the Paradise subway station, covered with cardboard. Tomorrow, she promised herself, tomorrow she would sleep in the apartment, even if it was on the hard floor. It was better than the street. When the car stopped in front of the subway, Sarah got out and saw Michael watching from the back window of his Uber, which he had called for himself. She waved, he waved back, and only then did his car leave. Sarah stood on the sidewalk. The rain reduced to a light drizzle, and for the first time in months, she felt something she had forgotten how to feel, hope, small, fragile, but there, timidly pulsing in her chest alongside the heartbeat of the baby she carried. She didn't know that 300 meters away, in the back seat of the Uber, Michael Thompson was looking out the window with the same expression of someone who had just found something they had been searching for a long time, without knowing they were looking. And he also didn't know that in the coming months, that chance encounter in the back of a restaurant would challenge every belief they both had about help, pride, deservingness, and love. The next 3 months transformed not only the apartment above the Essence Bistro, but also Sarah's life in ways she had never imagined possible. The empty, dusty space she had seen that first rainy night had become a home, small, modest, but genuinely hers. Michael kept every promise. The day after that meeting, he showed up at 8 in the morning with a moving truck containing furniture he swore were leftovers from other restaurants. A queen bed with a new mattress still in plastic, a slightly worn but comfortable beige two-seater sofa, a round wooden table with 4 chairs, the promised 4-burner stove, a small but efficient refrigerator, and even a light wood bookshelf. "All of this is leftover?" Sarah asked incredulously, watching the 2 restaurant workers go up and down the stairs carrying the furniture, from restaurants that closed, remodeled, or changed their decor. Michael replied with that casual manner she was beginning to recognize as his way of downplaying kindness. It was just going to gather dust in storage anyway, better to have it be useful here. But Sarah noticed the poorly removed price tag on the mattress, the shiny screws, of the bookshelf that was clearly new, the smell of fresh paint on the sofa. She didn't comment on anything. She was learning that some pride battles weren't worth fighting, especially when there was a baby depending on her. The appointment with Beatrice had been revealing and frightening. Sarah was moderately anemic, had slightly high blood pressure, and the baby, while healthy, was a bit below the ideal weight. Beatrice didn't judge her, didn't preach. She just laid out a plan: vitamin supplements, enhanced nutrition, weekly checkups. "You're strong, Sarah," Beatrice had said at the end of that first appointment, holding her hands over the exam table. "Stronger than you think, but even the strong need help sometimes, and you don't." On a warm September morning, Sarah stood by the apartment window, watching the hustle and bustle of the street below. She had given birth exactly 5 days ago, on a dramatic early morning that still made her shiver when she remembered it. It had been 2 in the morning when the contractions began in earnest. Sarah was alone in the apartment, trying to control the rising panic. She grabbed her phone with trembling hands and called the only number she knew would answer at any hour. David arrived in 15 minutes, disheveled, wearing sweatpants and a worn-out t-shirt that completely contrasted with the impeccable suits he wore during the day. He helped her down the stairs, holding her hand the entire way to St. Luke's Hospital, and when he offered to stay, Sarah didn't have the strength to refuse. The 7 hours of labor were the most intense of her life. Dr. Beatrice managed everything with calm efficiency. But it was David's presence that surprised her. He stood outside the delivery room when he wasn't allowed in, and inside, when Dr. Beatrice finally called him in during the final moments. "You don't need to look," Sarah gasped between contractions. "It's going to be ugly. It's going to be messy. You're bringing a life into the world." David held her hand so tightly that she could feel his pulse racing. "There's nothing more beautiful than that." And when Michael Johnson was finally born, crying and red, weighing 2 kilos and 800 grams, it was David's eyes that Sarah instinctively sought. He had tears streaming down his face, a trembling smile on his lips, and an expression of pure admiration that made something inside her chest break and rebuild at the same time. "You did it," he whispered, brushing the sweat-soaked hair from her forehead. "You were amazing." Now, 5 days later, Sarah watched Michael sleep in the makeshift crib that David had set up, a cushioned wooden box on wheels that he swore he had found in storage. The baby had his eyes closed, tiny hands clenched into fists, lips making sucking motions even in his sleep. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Sarah, it's me!" David's voice came from the other side. She opened the door to find him holding 2 large brown paper bags. "I brought lunch." He entered without waiting for an invitation, already familiar with the space he had helped furnish. "And before you complain, Dr. Beatrice said you need to eat well to breastfeed. So it's not charity, it's a medical order." Sarah rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. In the past few months, she and David had developed a curious dynamic. He constantly tried to help, she tried to refuse out of pride, and they both ended up finding a middle ground that worked. "Let me see the little prince." David set the bags down on the table and went to the crib, his face immediately softening at the sight of Michael. "Wow, he's grown since yesterday." He hasn't grown, David. Sarah chuckled softly. You saw him 24 hours ago. But look! He pointed as if he were indicating an important scientific discovery. His cheeks are bigger. They definitely are. Sarah moved closer, standing beside him. She could feel the warmth emanating from David's body, the subtle scent of masculine cologne mixed with something that was uniquely him. In recent months, she had grown accustomed to his presence. But lately, something was changing. The way her heart raced when she saw him, how she sought excuses to prolong conversations, how she slept better on nights they talked late. David, she called softly, not taking her eyes off Michael. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you do all this? She finally turned to face him. And don't tell me it's just because of your mother. I know that's part of it, but is there something more? Because you stay here, spend time with me, with Michael. You have 12 restaurants to manage, a whole life out there, and yet you show up here every day. David was silent for a long moment. His hands were resting on the side of the crib, fingers nervously drumming on the wood. Do you really want to know? He finally asked, his voice low. Yes. He took a deep breath, as if he were about to dive into deep waters. At first it was really because of my mother, he began, his eyes still on the baby. I saw you, and I saw her. I saw a chance to do the right thing. But then you started transforming this place. You painted the walls yellow, put those little plants in the window, brought color and life to a space that was dead. And I realized you weren't just someone who needed help. You were an incredible person who happened to be in a tough situation. You started to change how I saw everything. Sarah felt her heart race, but she didn't say anything, letting him continue. And then we started talking. David finally looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes took her breath away. Really talking, you know. Not those superficial conversations I have with everyone. You told me about your grandmother, about growing up in Missouri, about learning to cook. I told you about building the restaurants from scratch, about the pressure of maintaining the legacy my mother never had a chance to have. And I realized I hadn't really talked to someone in months, maybe years. He ran a hand through his hair, that nervous gesture Sarah knew well. I come here every day because I became a better person when I'm around you. The words came out in one breath, as if he had been holding them in for too long. You remind me of why I started all of this. Not for the money, not for fame or recognition, but because real food made with soul can change someone's day. It can make someone feel at home. And you have that, Sarah. That gift. Being close to it, being close to you, makes me feel closer to who I want to be. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. They were beautiful, honest words, but also frightening, because she was feeling things she shouldn't feel. David was her employer, her savior in many ways, and she was a newly single mother still, trying to rebuild her life from the rubble. It wasn't the time for romantic complications. David, she began, but was interrupted by Michael's sudden crying. The moment shattered. Sarah automatically picked up the baby, making the rocking motions that were becoming instinctive. David took a step back, as if realizing he had revealed too much. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. Forget what I said. No. Sarah held his arm with her free hand, preventing him from stepping away further. I don't want to forget. I just need time to process. Because I feel something too, David. It would be a lie to say I don't feel, but I'm scared. Scared of what? Scared of ruining all of this. She gestured vaguely around. You gave me a home, a job, a chance. What if we try something and it goes wrong? I lose everything, Michael loses everything, and I can't risk that. I can't risk him. David nodded slowly, understanding clear in his eyes. I understand, and you're right to be cautious. He lightly touched Michael's face, who was starting to calm down. I won't pressure you, Sarah. I won't do anything that puts you or little Michael at risk, but I want you to know that I'm here, not as an employer, not as a benefactor, as someone who cares, truly. Before Sarah could respond, David's phone rang loudly. He answered with a grimace. Hello? Yes, Marcelo, I'm listening. His expression grew increasingly serious. When did this happen? Right. No, don't do anything until I get there. 10 minutes. He hung up and looked at Sarah with frustration. Problem at Essence Bistro. I need to go handle it, but the food is here. It's still warm. Promise you'll eat. I promise. And if anything at all, call me, no matter the time. I know, go. David hesitated at the door, as if wanting to say something more. Then he just waved and left, his quick steps echoing on the stairs. Sarah stood in the middle of the apartment, Michael in her arms, feeling the weight of the conversation they had just had. Part of her wanted to run after David and say yes, that she wanted to try, that she felt that connection too. But the rational part, the part that had been hurt too much and needed to protect her, who, child above all, held her in place. She went to the window, watching David leave through the back door of the restaurant and get into his car. Even from up there she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he ran his hand over his face before starting the engine. What is Mommy going to do, Michael? She whispered to the baby, who was now looking at her with those dark, deep eyes. How do we deal with someone who makes us want to believe in happy endings again? Michael just yawned, completely oblivious to his mother's romantic dilemmas, and Sarah laughed, because it was exactly what she needed, a reminder that no matter what happened with David, she had something precious, something of her own, something no one could take away. She had Michael, and for now, that had to be enough. But as she warmed up the food David had brought, roasted chicken with vegetables, brown rice, a hearty salad, and even a slice of carrot cake for dessert, Sarah couldn't help but smile when she noticed the handwritten note inside one of the bags. For the best cook I know, rest now. Because when you return to the kitchen, we will revolutionize New York's gastronomy together. D. She tucked the note away in the drawer of her nightstand, alongside other small gestures David had made over the past few months. A flower he found on the way, a cookbook he wasn't going to use anyway, an instant photo taken on the day they painted the apartment, both covered in yellow paint and laughing. They were just small moments, small kindnesses, but together they were building something that Sarah didn't have the courage to name yet, something that scared and excited her in equal measure. And somewhere between fear and hope, she began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she deserved something good in life, something more than just survival. Maybe she deserved love. October arrived, bringing that New York heat that made the asphalt of Broadway shimmer as if it were alive. Sarah had been back in the kitchen of Essence Bistro for 2 weeks, and each day was an intense mix of professional fulfillment and challenges that tested not only her culinary skills, but also her ability to handle a completely new environment. The familiar smell of golden garlic, fresh herbs and simmering broths enveloped her as she chopped onions with precise, quick movements. Her hands had quickly regained their muscle memory. The knife danced between her fingers like a natural extension of her body. But the tension in the kitchen was palpable, thick as the steam rising from the industrial pots. "Attention! Dish coming out!" someone shouted behind her. Sarah instinctively stepped aside, making room for one of the cooks to rush by with a tray. The Essence Bistro kitchen during lunch hour was a chaotic ballet where every second mattered. Each movement needed to be synchronized. "Miss Sarah." The voice, laden with sarcasm, made her stiffen. "This sauce you prepared for the fish. It's quite rustic, don't you think? Our customers expect sophistication, not diner food." Chef Henry Johnson was 52 years old, with a perfectly trimmed grey moustache and an ego as big as the Eiffel Tower. He had been in charge of the kitchen at Essence Bistro for 5 years and had made it clear from Sarah's first day that he disapproved of her presence there. "I followed the recipe you approved yesterday, chef," Sarah replied calmly, although her hands gripped the knife handle tighter than necessary. "Sicilian lemon sauce with capers and butter, exactly as it is on the menu." "Yes, but you added too many capers." Henry picked up a spoon and tasted the sauce, his disdainful expression already formed before the spoon even touched his lips. "See? Too salty. You'll have to redo everything." Sarah knew he was lying. She had tasted the sauce 3 times. The balance was perfect. But she also knew that openly arguing with the head chef in front of the entire team would be professional suicide. "Yes, chef." She swallowed her anger and began to gather ingredients for a new sauce. "And Sarah?" Henry turned as he was leaving, a mischievous smile on his lips. "Next time, pay more attention. We don't want the customers to suffer because of maternal oversights. I know you have a small baby. It must be exhausting. Maybe you should consider a longer leave." The jab was precise. Sarah felt her face burn, but maintained a neutral expression. Other cooks in the kitchen fell into an awkward silence, heads bowed over their respective workstations. "I'm fine, chef. Thank you for your concern." When Henry finally left for the dining room, Sarah allowed herself a moment of frustration, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. It wasn't the first time. In the last 15 days, Henry had found problems with almost everything she did. Too much salt, too little salt, overcooked, undercooked. Her dishes were too simple, too complex, too Brazilian, not Brazilian enough. "He's afraid of you." A low voice beside her made her open her eyes. Luke, one of the most experienced sous chefs in the house, was next to her pretending to organize spices, but actually offering silent solidarity. He was about 35, with black hair tied in a bun and tattoos running down his arms. "Afraid of me?" Sarah let out a humorless laugh. "Why? I'm nobody." "You're exactly why he's afraid." Luke lowered his voice even more. "You're talented, authentic, and you have the obvious protection of the boss. Henry knows that if you show what you're truly capable of, he becomes history. That's why he keeps sabotaging you. That sauce was perfect, Sarah. Everyone here knows it." "So why doesn't anyone say anything?" "Because Henry has power. He's famous, has connections. If he leaves, he could take half the brigade with him, and everyone here has bills to pay." Luke gave her a supportive pat on the shoulder. "But don't worry. The truth always comes out, always." Sarah nodded but didn't feel any more at ease. She returned to the task of remaking the perfectly good sauce, feeling the weight of injustice in her chest. That night, after service, Sarah climbed up to her apartment exhausted. Michael was with the neighbor from the next building, Mrs. Johnson, a 60-year-old woman who'd become a sort of surrogate grandmother for the baby. He was an angel today. Mrs. Johnson handed over Michael, already asleep, wrapped in a yellow blanket. He nursed, pooped twice, and slept like a little angel. "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. I don't know what I would do without you." "Oh, don't mention it, dear. It's a joy to have a baby in my life again." She lovingly stroked Michael's head. "My grandchildren have all grown up. They don't even visit me anymore. This little one is filling my empty heart." After Mrs. Johnson left, Sarah placed Michael in the crib and simply collapsed onto the sofa. Her body ached, feet, back, arms. But it was the emotional exhaustion that weighed the most. Keeping her composure in the face of Henry's constant provocations was draining her energy in ways that physical work never could. A knock at the door pulled her from her stupor. She knew who it was even before opening. Raphael had a specific rhythm to his knock, 3 quick taps, followed by a pause. Hi. He was leaning against the doorframe, still, in his suit from the day, but with his tie loosened and the first signs of fatigue on his face. I saw the light on. I thought I'd check if everything was okay. It is. The lie came automatically. Raphael studied her with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see beyond the masks she tried to maintain. "Can I come in?" Sarah stepped aside, letting him pass. Raphael went straight to the crib, as he always did, watching Michael sleep with that gentle expression that completely contrasted with the tough businessman he showed the world. "How was your first full day in the kitchen?" he asked casually, but Sarah sensed the genuine concern behind the question. It was challenging. Is Henry being problematic? Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to seem like she was complaining. She didn't want Raphael to think she couldn't handle the pressure. But she was also tired of swallowing everything alone. "He doesn't like me," she finally admitted, sitting down on the sofa. Raphael joined her, keeping a respectful distance. "Everything I do is wrong. Today, he made me redo a sauce that was perfect just because he could. Because he has power and I don't." Raphael tensed beside her. "Did he say something disrespectful?" "He made a suggestion about me being a mother." Sarah rubbed her face with her hands. "It wasn't anything serious, but—" "It was," David interrupted, his voice low but filled with restrained anger. "That's harassment, Sarah. It's unacceptable." "I can handle it," she protested. "I've worked in worse kitchens, I've heard worse things. I can take it." "But you shouldn't have to endure it." David turned to face her completely. "You work for me, Sarah. And in my restaurant, people are treated with respect. All people." "David, please." Sarah grabbed his arm before he could stand up. "Don't do anything now. Not for my sake. It'll look like I need you to fight my battles. It'll make everything worse." "Then what do you want me to do?" Sarah took a deep breath, thinking. "Give me a chance. A real chance to show what I'm capable of." The words came out with growing conviction. "Henry sabotages me because he's afraid I might be good. So let me prove that I am, without him in the way, without interference." David was silent for a long moment, processing. "The critic from Gourmet magazine is coming to evaluate the restaurant next week," he finally said. "It's an important review. It could earn us a 3rd Michelin star. Henry has been preparing the menu for weeks." "And what if he can't be here?" Sarah suggested, her heart racing. "What if I have to take over the kitchen that day?" "That would be risky." David watched her carefully. "For you and for the restaurant." "I know, but do you believe in me?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah saw the conflict. In David's eyes, the pragmatic businessman versus the man who cared for her, who wanted to protect her, but also knew that overprotecting would disrespect her strength. "I believe," he finally said. "But let's do it differently. I'll organize a private dinner this Saturday. 20 people, investors and opinion makers. You'll prepare the menu. If it goes well, you take over the kitchen on the day of the official evaluation." Sarah felt a wave of adrenaline mixed with pure panic. "This Saturday, that's in 3 days. Plenty of time for you to create something amazing." David smiled, that smile that made her heart skip a beat. "You said you wanted a chance. Here it is. Cooking with soul, remember? That's what you have, and Henry doesn't. Show them that." Sarah nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. Dishes she had learned from Grandma Betty, techniques she had developed over the years, flavors that told stories. "I'll need total freedom in the kitchen that day." "You have it. And Sarah." David stood up, preparing to leave. "Don't tell Henry about this. Not yet. The less he knows, the better." After David left, Sarah stayed awake late into the night, an open notebook on. Her lap, writing and rewriting possible menus. Michael woke up twice to nurse, and each time she fed him while continuing to think, plan. She was scared, terrified actually, but she was also, for the first time in months, genuinely excited. Here was her chance, her opportunity to prove, to David, to Henry, but mostly to herself, that she deserved to be there. That her talent was real, not just a product of someone else's kindness. On Saturday night, she would show New York what Sarah Johnson was capable of, and maybe, just maybe, she would start to believe it herself. Saturday arrived like a storm of nerves and frantic preparations. Sarah woke up at 5 in the morning, having only slept 3 hours. Michael was still sound asleep in the crib, oblivious to the anxiety consuming his mother like fire on dry paper. She stood by the window, watching New York slowly wake up, the first buses passing, bakeries opening their doors, workers hurrying to the subway. Her fingers drummed nervously on the windowsill as she mentally reviewed each dish she would prepare that night. The menu she had created was a love letter to her own story. It would start with chicken pot pies filled with shredded free-range chicken and artisanal cream cheese, small like golden jewels. Then a reimagined green soup, smoked artisanal sausage, finely chopped organic kale, potatoes she had personally selected at the market yesterday. The main dish would be snapper with a Brazil nut crust and plantain farofa, accompanied by a parsnip puree as soft as a cloud. And to finish, a creamy cornbread cake with guava paste, just like Grandma Betty made on rainy afternoons in Springfield. Each dish told a part of who she was. Each spice carried a memory. It was risky, perhaps too personal. But it was authentic, and authenticity was the only weapon she had against Henry's impeccable technique. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, her hands pressed against the cold glass of the window. "For Michael, for you, for everything you've been through to get here." Michael began to whimper in the crib, and Sarah went to him automatically, picking him up. The baby was exactly 2 months old now, his eyes already focusing better, sometimes breaking into smiles that melted away any lingering doubt about her choices. "Good morning, my love." She kissed his warm forehead. "Today is an important day. Mommy is going to show everyone what she's capable of, and one day, when you grow up, you'll understand that all of this was for us, to build something better." She nursed Michael as the light outside grew brighter, then left him with Mrs. Johnson with detailed instructions and promises to pick him up late at night. "Go out there and shine, dear." Mrs. Johnson held her hands firmly. "I've seen what you cook. It has the flavor of a mother, of a grandmother. True love. These people will feel it." The kitchen at Essence Bistro was uncharted territory at 7 in the morning. Normally, Sarah arrived at 10 for the lunch shift, but today she needed time, space, and total concentration. David was already there, sipping coffee while reviewing something on his tablet. He wore dark jeans and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, more casual than his usual suit, but still impeccable. When he saw her enter, he smiled. "Did you sleep well?" "I'd be lying if I said yes." Sarah tied on her apron, already in work mode. "But I'm ready. The support team arrives at 2. David showed her the tablet. 2. Kitchen assistants, a sous chef to help with organization, all my trusted people from Essence Gardens, and more importantly, Henry won't be here today. Sarah paused mid-wash of her hands. "What do you mean?" "I sent him to supervise the opening of the new restaurant in Springfield." David gave a mischievous smile. "I told him I needed his expertise to ensure the standards were maintained. He was so flattered he didn't even question it. He won't be back until Monday." Sarah felt a wave of relief and gratitude. "Thank you. For that. For everything." Don't thank me yet." David stepped closer, standing on the other side of the stainless steel counter. "Today I'm not your friend, or whatever we are to each other. Today I'm your boss, evaluating a chef. The guests are real, the expectations are high. If it's not good enough, I can't promote you out of favoritism. That would be unfair to the whole team." Sarah met his gaze and saw he was serious. And strangely, that made her feel more at ease. She didn't want privileges. She wanted fairness. She wanted recognition based on merit. Then evaluate rigorously. She extended her hand over the counter. "That's what I want. That's what I deserve." David shook her hand, the grip firm and professional, but his fingers lingered a second longer than necessary before letting go. "Good luck, Chef Sarah." Hearing that chef before her name ignited something within her. She was no longer just Sarah, the pregnant woman looking for scraps. She was Chef Sarah, and today she would prove she deserved that title. The following hours passed in a blur of intense preparation. Sarah washed, chopped, seasoned, tasted, adjusted. Her hands worked with a certainty that came from somewhere deep, muscle, memory, and soul intertwined. By the time the support team arrived, she already had half of the components ready. Charles, the sous chef in his 40s with a scar on his chin, assessed her with evident skepticism. "So you're the boss's pet?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement laden with judgment. Sarah stopped chopping onions and looked him directly in the eye. "I'm the chef who's running this kitchen today." Her voice came out firm, without arrogance but with no room for questioning. "If you have a problem with that, you can talk to Mr. David now. But if you stay, follow my instructions. Deal?" Charles studied her for a long moment. Then something in his expression changed. Perhaps respect, perhaps just professional resignation. "Yes, chef." The words echoed in the kitchen. The two assistants, young guys no older than 20, immediately echoed, "Yes, chef." And so Sarah Johnson took command of a brigade for the first time in her life. Service began at 8 in the evening. Sarah could hear the murmurs of guests arriving through the kitchen's swinging doors. David had chosen them strategically, owners of renowned restaurants, food columnists, digital influencers with millions of followers. Every opinion would weigh like gold or lead. 20. "Chicken pot pies going out now," Sarah announced, sliding the tray to Charles, who arranged them on individual plates with surgical precision. "Heard, chef. Chicken pot pies going out." The rhythm began to establish itself. Clear commands, synchronized movements, the chaotic but organized dance that defines a professional kitchen at its best. Then came the first feedback, empty plates returning, scraped clean down to the last crumb. One of the waiters returned with a message. "Table 4 wants to know where the recipe for the chicken pot pies is from. They said they haven't eaten anything this good since childhood." Sarah felt. Her eyes burned but blinked quickly. There was no time for emotions. 19 plates still needed to be served. The green soup came out in warmed bowls, steam rising like a fragrant offering. 5 minutes later, more plates returned clean. A guest sent a request for the recipe. Another wanted to know if they could order for private events. "Focus, Sarah," she whispered to herself as she prepared the main dish. "It's not over yet." The snapper with a nut crust was the crucial moment. Fish is unforgiving. 1 minute too long and it's dry, 1 minute too short and it's raw. She timed every second, tested the texture with her finger, observed the perfect golden color of the crust. Main dish going out. 20 perfectly plated dishes slid across the pass. Sarah wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. The kitchen was as hot as a furnace, her apron stained with splashes of sauce and flour. But she had never felt more alive, more in the right place. "Chef Sarah," Charles called, and there was something different in his voice now. Table 8 sent compliments to the chef. They said this dish should be in international guides. Table 12 too, one of the assistants added, smiling. And Table 15 asked when you're going to open your own restaurant. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. But the service wasn't over. The dessert was still to come. The cornbread cake came out of the oven warm, scented with fennel and the finest cornmeal she had bought from an artisanal producer in Missouri. The guava paste melted over each slice like liquid gold and molten ruby. "Last round," she announced. 20 desserts with care. The dishes were coming out, each a small masterpiece of simplicity and flavor. And then silence. Those minutes of waiting where all that remains is to hope and trust that it touched the people on the other side of the swinging doors. David gradually entered the kitchen, and the expression on his face said everything before the words came out. "They want to meet you." He was smiling, a huge smile that completely transformed his serious face. "All of them, Sarah. They're asking to meet the chef." Sarah automatically looked down. She was dirty, sweaty, exhausted, hair escaping from her bun, apron stained, hands red from washing. "I can't go out like this." "Look at me. You look perfect just like that." David stepped closer, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're exactly how a real chef should look after serving 20 perfect dishes. Come on, they want to thank you in person." Charles and the assistants were watching the exchange, discreet smiles on their faces. Sarah took a deep breath, removed her stained apron, but kept her chef's hat on, and followed David into the dining room. Applause started as soon as she appeared. 20 people standing, clapping, some with tears in their eyes. An elderly lady at table 6 approached, gripping Sarah's hands tightly. "My dear, this cornbread cake." Her voice trembled. "My grandmother made it just like this. She passed away 15 years ago, and I haven't tasted this flavor since then. You brought her back to me for a few minutes. Thank you so much." Others came too, each with a story. The fish reminded them of beach trips. The chicken pot pies were just like the ones they had at childhood parties. The green soup was like what their mothers made on cold nights. Sarah then realized what she had done. She hadn't just cooked food. She had cooked memories. She had cooked affection. She had cooked homes and stories and pieces of childhood that people thought they had lost forever. "You touched people, Sarah," David whispered beside her as the guests finally began to leave, each still animatedly talking about the dishes. "Just as I knew you would." When the last guest left, Sarah finally allowed her legs to give way. She sat down in one of the chairs in the now empty and silent dining room. "I did it," she said almost incredulously. "I really did it." "You crushed it," David corrected, sitting next to her. "And Monday morning, I'm going to have a talk with Henry. You're taking over as sous chef immediately, and when he inevitably creates problems, I'll have to make tough choices." Sarah turned to him, alarmed. "David, no. I don't want to be responsible for you losing your head chef. Other cooks might leave with him. You said that. I can't cause that kind of damage." "It's not you causing damage. It's Henry being unable to recognize talent when it's right in front of him." David ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "But you're right, it's complicated. I'll think about how to handle it. For now, just enjoy the victory. You deserve it." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Outside, New York pulsed with nightlife, cars honking, people shouting, distant sirens. But inside, in the empty dining room of Essence, there was a bubble of peace. "David?" Sarah finally broke the silence. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." He turned to her, his brown eyes reflecting the soft lights of the dining room. "It was easy to believe in you, Sarah. The hard part is just believing. When what I really want is—" He stopped, seeming to reconsider finishing that sentence. Sarah felt her heart race, the air between them suddenly charged with something unspoken. "What is it?" she whispered. David opened his mouth to respond, but his phone rang loudly, breaking the moment. He answered with a frustrated grimace. "Hello? Yes, everything's fine here. No, you can leave it until Monday. It's not urgent." He hung up and looked at Sarah with an apologetic expression. "I should let you go rest. It's been a long day." Sarah nodded, though part of her wanted that moment to continue, for him to finish the sentence he had started. But maybe it was better this way. It was a lot to process at once, the success of the night, the promised promotion, and whatever was growing between them that neither had the courage to name yet. She went up to the apartment and found Michael sleeping peacefully on the couch, with Mrs. Johnson dozing beside him. She paid the neighbour, who, as always, protested but accepted, laid Michael in the crib, and finally allowed herself to collapse onto the bed. Before sleeping, she picked up her phone and saw messages from unknown numbers, guests from the night asking for contact, complimenting, offering opportunities. But it was David's message that she reread 3 times before finally closing her eyes. "Tonight you weren't just a good cook. You were art in the form of food, and I will make sure the whole world knows it. D." Sarah slept with a smile on her lips and dreams of possibilities that for the first time in a long time seemed truly attainable. Monday arrived charged with an electric tension that seemed to run through every corridor of Essence. Sarah woke, up earlier than usual, her stomach churning with nerves. Today, David would confront Henry about her promotion, and the consequences were completely unpredictable. She breastfed Michael while watching the sun rise through the window, the first golden rays painting the yellow walls of the apartment with even warmer tones. The baby nursed peacefully, oblivious to the storms brewing in his mother's life. "What do you think, little Michael?" she whispered, stroking his fine hair. "Is Mommy doing the right thing, or is she being selfish, wanting to grow too fast?" Michael responded with a loud burp that made her laugh. "It's important to laugh, despite the anxiety. You're right, sometimes we just need to move forward and see what happens." The kitchen was in its usual rhythm of preparation for lunch when Sarah came down at 9:30, but there was something different in the air. The other cooks greeted her with respectful nods, some even with genuine smiles. The news of Saturday's dinner had spread. "Good morning, Chef Sarah." Luke, the sous chef who had been kind to her from the start, approached with 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might need this today." Thank you." Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully. "Do you know anything? Michael said he was going to talk to Henry this morning." "I know Henry came back from Springfield in a terrible mood. It seems the opening didn't go as well as expected." Luke lowered his voice. "And I also know that 3 food critics who were at Saturday's dinner have already posted reviews praising the renewal of the Essence menu with touches of Brazilian authenticity." Henry read them all. He's furious. As if summoned by the mention, Henry Johnson stormed into the kitchen. Like a tempest of contained rage, his face was red, the vein in his temple visibly pulsing. His eyes scanned the kitchen until they found Sarah. "You!" He spat the word like poison. "My office, now!" Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Luke, who made a discreet gesture of encouragement. She followed Henry to the small office in the back, her heart hammering against her ribs. Henry slammed the door hard enough to make the pictures on the wall shake. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he began, not shouting, but with a low intensity that was even more frightening. "You went behind my back, seduced the boss, and staged a little play to discredit me." "I didn't do any of that." Sarah kept her voice steady despite her fear. "Michael gave me a chance to show my work. I cooked, that's all." "That's all?" Henry let out a humorless laugh. "You manipulated everyone with that sentimental home-cooked food. You appealed to cheap nostalgia instead of showing true technique." Anyone can make food that reminds them of Grandma. That's not fine dining, it's emotional therapy. The words were meant to hurt, and they did. But Sarah forced herself to stand tall, chin up. Food is meant to nourish both body and soul, Chef Henry. Technique without soul is surgery, not gastronomy. My grandmother taught me that. Your grandmother. Henry practically spat the words. What was your grandmother? A cook for a summer festival. And you think that qualifies you to be here, in my kitchen, in my restaurant? Actually, Henry, it's not your kitchen anymore. Michael's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He was standing in the doorway, which no one had noticed had opened. Dr. Beatrice was right behind him, arms crossed, a stern expression on her face. Henry turned, his anger momentarily replaced by confusion. What do you mean? It's not my kitchen anymore. Michael stepped fully into the office, taking up space with that natural presence of someone used to commanding. I mean, you're fired, Henry, effective immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah felt the ground sway beneath her feet. This wasn't what she wanted, not like this. You can't do this. Henry finally found his words, his voice coming out in a high pitch. I have a contract. I'm the name behind this restaurant. You have a contract with a termination clause for inappropriate behavior. Michael pulled some papers from the inner pocket of his jacket. Beatrice came as a witness. We just heard you humiliate an employee based on her social background, make unfounded accusations of seduction, and show complete disrespect for Brazilian culinary culture. More than enough for breach of contract. This is ridiculous. Henry looked from Michael to Sarah, his eyes wild. She arrived here 3 months ago, pregnant, and looking for food in the trash, and you're going to replace me with her? Watch it. Michael's voice came low, dangerous. Be very careful with what you're about to say. Beatrice stepped forward, her posture that of a doctor used to dealing with emergencies. Sarah doesn't need to defend herself. She proved her worth through work, not through shouting and intimidation, something you clearly never learned. Henry looked from one to the other, realizing he was cornered. Then his expression turned cruel, venomous. You'll regret this, he pointed at Michael. Call my contacts. When I tell everyone what happened here, this restaurant will sink. 6 of the best chefs will leave with me. What will you have left? A cook with big dreams. If 6 chefs prefer to follow you instead of being part of something real, then they can go too. Michael didn't blink. You have 24 hours to vacate the apartment the restaurant provides. Your final paycheck and severance will be ready by Friday. Now get off my property. Henry stood still for another second, trembling with rage. Then he spat on the floor, literally, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard that one of the pictures fell off the wall. The silence returned, but now it was charged with shock and consequences not yet fully processed. Michael, Sarah began, but he raised his hand. No, you're not going to apologize for anything. He turned to her completely. Henry chose this path on his own, with months of abusive behavior. What happened today was inevitable. You just accelerated something that had been dying for a long time. But what about the other chefs? What if they really leave? With him? Then we rebuild. David ran his hand through his hair, suddenly looking tired. With people who want to be here, who believe in what we're doing. Beatrice gently placed her hand on Sarah's shoulder. Are you okay? I know it wasn't easy to hear those things. Sarah nodded, though Henry's words still echoed painfully. Grandma's food, cheap emotional therapy, looking for food in the trash. Each phrase was an arrow aimed at her most vulnerable points. I will survive, she said, forcing herself to believe it. More than survive. David stepped closer and Sarah saw something fierce in his eyes. You will thrive because he was wrong, Sarah. Soulless technique is dead, and you have more life in your kitchen than Henry had in his entire career. Before Sarah could respond, the door opened again. Luke rushed in, looking agitated. "Chef, I mean, David. Henry is in the kitchen trying to convince the team to leave with him. He's saying you're crazy, that you're going to ruin the restaurant, that they're all better off looking for jobs elsewhere before it's too late." David muttered a curse and quickly left. Sarah and Beatrice followed him. In the kitchen, the 12 cooks and assistants were gathered in a semicircle as Henry gestured dramatically, still wearing the Essence Bistro apron even though he was no longer part of the team. "And when this place closes, because it will close, you will have on your resume that you were fired from a failed restaurant," Henry was saying. "Or you can leave with me now, with dignity, and I guarantee exceptional references for everyone. Henry, you have 10 seconds to leave or I will call security," David announced, his voice echoing in the now silent kitchen. Henry turned, a nasty smile on his lips. "Let them choose, David. Democracy, right? You stay with a restaurant run by an amateur, or come with me and keep your careers intact." He looked around the semicircle. "Who's coming?" No one moved. The silence stretched, heavy and tense. Sarah felt her heart in her throat. Then Luke stepped forward. For a horrible moment, Sarah thought he was going with Henry, but he went in the opposite direction, standing by David. "I'm staying," Luke simply said. "Me too." One of the assistants, a young girl named Julia, joined Luke. "I'm staying." Charles, the sous chef who had worked with Sarah on Saturday, was next. One by one, 11 of the 12 staff members moved. Only 2 older cooks, who had worked with Henry for years, stayed by his side, looking uncomfortable but loyal. Henry turned pale as he realized he had completely lost. "You will regret this," he said once more, but now his voice was weak, defeated. "All of you. It's over, Henry." David gestured to the exit. "And take them with you. Your former colleagues have work to do." When Henry finally left, followed by the 2 loyal cooks, the kitchen erupted in excited chatter. David raised his hands for silence. "Guys, I know this was dramatic and unexpected," he began, his voice firm but not harsh. "And I understand if some of you are uncertain about the future. But here's the truth. This restaurant is not going to sink. It will evolve. From today on, Sarah Johnson is the head chef of Essence Bistro. Luke will be the head sous chef. And you, all of you who chose to stay, will have the opportunity to grow in ways you never would have under Henry." He looked specifically at Sarah. "Chef Sarah has complete creative freedom. The menu will change. The style will change. We will honor technique but add soul. And together we will show New York that authentic Brazilian cuisine deserves the same respect as any international kitchen." The staff looked at Sarah. She felt the weight of all those expectations, all those careers that now depended partly on her. It was terrifying. It was also exactly what she had always wanted. "I won't promise it will be easy," Sarah said, her voice coming out stronger than she expected. "I will make mistakes, I will need your help, and there will be tough days. But I promise respect, honesty, and that every dish that comes out of this kitchen will have soul. It will have a story. It will make people remember why they love real food." Julia, the young assistant, started to applaud. Luke joined in. Soon the whole kitchen was clapping, and Sarah felt warm tears streaming down her face, unable to stop them. Hours later, when the lunch service finally ended, served with 2 fewer people but surprisingly smooth, Sarah went up to the apartment in a state of complete emotional shock. She had barely closed the door when a knock sounded. It was David. "Can I come in?" Sarah just stepped aside, making space. David entered and stood in the middle of the room, looking as exhausted as she felt. "That was crazy," she finally said. "It was necessary." David sat on the couch and Sarah joined him, keeping a respectful distance. "And inevitable," Henry had been rotten inside for a long time. He just needed a reason to explode. But what if he was right? Sarah let slip the fear that was eating her inside. What if I'm not good enough? What if I mess everything up and people lose their jobs because of me? David turned to her, taking her hands in his. Sarah, look at me. He waited until she found his eyes. You are exceptional. Not despite your background, but because of it. You know flavors that Henry will never know. You understand the soul of food in a way that technique books will never teach. And on Saturday you proved that to... It was 20 of the most demanding people in New York. But one night is not. It was more than one night. Michael gently interrupted. It was the confirmation of what I saw that first night in the rain, what I've been seeing for the past few months. You were born for this, Sarah, and I will be here, supporting you, until you finally believe that too. Sarah looked at his hands, holding hers, strong hands, calloused from work despite the wealth, warm and firm. She looked at his face, into the brown eyes that saw her in a way no one had ever seen before, and she realized she was completely, irrevocably in love with Michael Thompson, and that was absolutely terrifying. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice trembling, about why I'm so scared of all this. Michael waited, not letting go of her hands. David, Michael's father. Sarah swallowed hard. I thought he loved me. I thought we were building something together. We worked side by side for 5 years, saving money penny by penny for our dream. And then I found out I was pregnant, and suddenly everything he promised turned into lies. He took our money, our plans, and left me with doubts and a baby on the way. Tears now flowed freely, months of pain finally finding words. So when you show up and offer help, offer opportunity, offer whatever it is you're offering beyond work, part of me is terrified that it's a lie again, that I'll wake up and find out it was a dream or a cruel prank, or that you'll leave when you and realize I'm not that special. Michael released one of her hands to gently wipe the tears from her face with his thumb. I am not David, he said, each word heavy with promise. And I won't leave you. Not when things get tough. Not when you doubt yourself. Never. Because you are not a charity project, Sarah. You are the most incredible person I've ever met. And what I feel for you has nothing to do with pity or kindness. It has to do with admiration, respect, and... He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. And love. He finally said, I fell in love with you, Sarah, and I tried not to fall in love because I know the timing is terrible and you have 1,000 reasons not to trust. But I can't pretend anymore that it's just professional concern or friendship. It's more than that, much more. Sarah was breathless. The words she had feared and longed to hear were there, hovering between them like something fragile and precious. Michael's cry interrupted the moment. They looked at each other and shared a simultaneous laugh, the tension breaking slightly. That boy has terrible timing. Michael joked. Or perfect. Sarah stood up to pick up Michael, who was red from crying in the crib. Give me some time to process all this. Today was a lot. All the time you need. Michael stood up too, clearly reluctant to leave. But Sarah, what I said is true, and I won't take it back or change my mind. When you're ready, I'll still be here. After he left, Sarah stood still with Michael in her arms, the baby already calming against her chest. She went to the window, saw Michael leave the building and get into his car, saw him sit there for long minutes before finally driving away. Your mom is so scared, little Michael, she whispered. So scared to believe that good things can happen. But maybe it's time to be brave again. November arrived, bringing that humid heat that made New York feel like a pressure cooker about to explode. Sarah had been in the kitchen of Essence Bistro since 5 in the morning, reviewing the new menu for the 10th time. It had been a month since Henry's dramatic departure, and the critic from Gourmet magazine was coming to evaluate the restaurant. Tonight, her hands trembled slightly as she checked each ingredient in the cold storage. Fresh snapper from the municipal market, check. Perfectly roasted Brazil nuts, check. Organic parsnips, kale from the community garden in Brooklyn, artisanal sausage from a producer in Missouri that she had personally selected. "Chef, how long have you been here?" Luke entered the cold storage, bringing with him a wave of warmer air from outside. "I don't know. What time is it?" 6:40. He frowned, concerned. "Did you sleep?" Sarah didn't answer, which was answer enough. The truth was she could barely sleep properly for days. Between taking care of Michael, running the kitchen, refining the menu, and dealing with her confusing feelings about Michael, her body was basically operating on pure caffeine and adrenaline. "Sarah, you need to rest." Luke spoke with that brotherly tone he had developed with her over the past weeks. "It doesn't matter if you have the best menu in the world if the chef faints in the middle of service." I know. She stepped out of the cold storage, rubbing her eyes. "It's just that I can't stop thinking about everything that could go wrong. What if the snapper isn't cooked right? What if the critic doesn't like the proposal? What if he writes that it was a drop in quality after Henri? Then he will be wrong." Michael entered the kitchen at that moment, bringing 2 paper bags. "And good morning to you too." Sarah felt that familiar tightness in her chest upon seeing him. In recent weeks, they had maintained a careful dance of professional closeness. He hadn't mentioned the love declaration again, respecting the space she had asked for, but he was always there, as she appeared with coffee, offering to stay with Michael, while she tested recipes, sending messages of encouragement during moments of insecurity. And with each passing day, Sarah felt her defenses crumbling a little more. "I brought cheese bread from Missouri Bakery and coffee from New York Coffee Roasters." David placed the bags on the office table. "You need to eat something decent before today's service." "I'm not hungry." "I didn't ask if you were hungry." David opened one of the packages, the unmistakable smell of fresh cheese bread filling the room. "I asked if you're going to eat, and the answer is yes, because you're not going to faint. In my kitchen today." Luke gave a discreet smile and left, clearly sensing this was a private moment. Sarah grabbed a cheese bread more to avoid a discussion than out of desire, but when she took her first bite, she realized she was hungry. Very hungry, in fact. She ate 3 pieces in succession, accepting the coffee David offered. "Better?" he asked, sitting across from her at the small table. "Better," Sarah admitted. "Thank you." "Sarah, can I say something?" David waited for her to nod before continuing. "You're going to crush it today, not just because I believe in you, although I believe with everything I have, but because you prepared. The menu is impeccable. The team is sharp. You did everything right. Now you need to trust your work. And what if it's not enough? Then we learn and improve." David leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her. "But it will be enough, because you're not doing this just for the technique or the critique. You're doing this because it's who you are. And that, Sarah, that is unshakable." Sarah held his gaze, feeling something release inside her chest. He was right. She had poured her soul into that menu. Each dish told a story, from her childhood in Missouri, the struggle in New York, motherhood, and overcoming challenges. If the critic didn't understand, it wasn't because her work was inferior. It was because he was looking for something different. "David, she started, but was interrupted by his phone ringing. He answered with a frustrated grimace, listened for a few seconds, and his expression changed completely. "What? When? Okay, I'm going now." He hung up and looked at Sarah, concern evident on his face. "Problem at Essence Gardens. Kitchen fire. No one was hurt, but Need to go there now to deal with the firefighters and insurance. Go, Sarah said immediately. I'm fine here. Are you sure? Absolutely. She stood up, already in professional mode. Go take care of your restaurant. I'll take care of this one. David hesitated for a second longer, then leaned in and quickly kissed her forehead, a gesture so natural that neither of them fully processed it until he was already leaving through the door. Sarah stood still, her hand automatically going to where his lips had touched. It wasn't a romantic kiss, it was brotherly, concerned. But it sent waves of warmth through her nonetheless. Focus, Sarah, she whispered to herself. Today is not a day for distractions. The hours flew by in frantic preparation. By 7:30 in the evening, the kitchen was in perfect sync. Sarah had delegated each station, tested every sauce, checked every seasoning. The team was tense but confident. Chef, the critic has arrived, Julia announced, peeking through the pass. Table 12, a man in his 50s alone, taking notes in a notebook. Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment. All right. Normal service for all tables. We don't treat him differently. Understood? Yes, chef. The response came in chorus. The first dish went out, chicken pot pies with cream cheese. Sarah watched through the pass as the waiter placed them in front of the critic. The man, grey hair, thin-framed glasses, neutral expression, picked one up, observed it for a few seconds and took a bite. No expression, nothing. He chewed calmly, made a note in his notebook, and continued eating. Did he like it? Julia whispered next to Sarah. I have no idea, Sarah admitted, nerves on edge. The green soup was served 15 minutes later. Same routine. Observation, tasting, note-taking, neutral expression. Sarah felt her stomach churn. He doesn't like it, she murmured to Luke. Look at his face, totally impassive. Or he's loving it and keeping professionalism, Luke offered. Critics can't show emotion. It ruins the evaluation. Sarah wanted to believe that. She really did. The main course was served at 8:15, snapper with a nut crust, parsnip puree, plantain farofa, and a light lemon sauce. It was her favorite dish, the one she had put the most care and love into. From the pass, she watched the critic cut the fish. The knife glided smoothly, a good sign, meaning it was cooked perfectly. He brought the fork to his mouth, chewing slowly, and then, for the first time that night, his expression changed. His eyebrows raised slightly. He took another piece, this time with a bit of everything on the fork. Fish, crust, puree, farofa. Sarah held her breath. The critic closed his eyes for a second while chewing. When he opened them, he made a longer note in his notebook, underlining something twice. Is that good or bad? Sarah whispered to no one in particular. I think it's good, Luke replied, sounding hopeful. The critic finished the entire dish, scraping even the last drop of sauce with the bread. That had to mean something positive, right? Dessert was served at 9, cornbread cake with guava paste. Sarah had personally made each of those cakes that night, waking up at 3 in the morning to ensure they were perfect. The critic picked up the fork, cut a piece, and Sarah Johnson took a deep breath. And then something happened that she didn't expect. He smiled. Not a huge smile, but a small and genuine lift of the corners of his mouth. He finished. The dessert, faster than the other dishes, made several notes, and finally asked for the check. He's leaving, Julia announced. He paid and is heading out. Sarah leaned against the counter, her legs suddenly weak. It was done. For better or worse, it was done. Now it was just a matter of waiting for the review to be published. Chef Sarah, one of the waiters rushed back. The gentleman at table 12 asked to speak with you. Sarah's heart nearly stopped. He wants to talk to me. He's waiting at the door. Sarah removed her chef's hat with trembling hands, straightened her apron and walked to the entrance of the restaurant. The critic was there, coat over his arm, waiting. Chef Sarah Johnson, He extended his hand. "I'm David Thompson from Gourmet USA." "Pleasure." Sarah shook his hand, trying to read something in his neutral expression. "I hope you enjoyed the meal." David Thompson studied her for a long moment. "You know, Chef, I've been doing this for 23 years, he began, and Sarah felt her stomach drop. That sounded like the beginning of a negative review. "I've dined in 3 Michelin-starred restaurants in Paris, Lyon, and Tokyo. I've tasted creations from chefs who are living legends of global gastronomy." He paused, and Sarah braced herself for the blow. "And today, in this restaurant that was supposedly in decline after the departure of the previous chef, I had the most honest and exciting meal I've had in 5 years. Sarah blinked, confused. "Excuse me, what? That cornbread cake?" David now had tears in his eyes, without any shame. "My maternal grandmother made it exactly like that. She was from Springfield, came to New York in the 60s. She passed away when I was 12, and I haven't eaten anything that made me remember her so intensely in 40 years. He wiped his eyes with a handkerchief he took from his pocket. "You're not just making food, Chef Sarah. You're preserving memories, stories, culture, and you do it with impeccable technique and deep respect for the ingredients. That's rare, extremely rare." Sarah felt her own tears threatening to fall. "Does this mean the review will be out in next month's edition?" David put away the handkerchief. "But I can give you a heads-up, 5 stars, and a personal recommendation from me for readers not to miss the chance to experience one of the most authentic and exciting kitchens in New York right now." Sarah had to lean against the doorframe. It couldn't be true. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just keep doing what you do." David put on his coat. "And tell Mr. Thompson that he was very lucky to find you. Very lucky indeed." After the critic left, Sarah stood at the entrance of the restaurant, processing everything. Then she turned around and saw the entire kitchen brigade peeking through the pass, wide-eyed. He said 5 stars. Sarah announced, her voice trembling. The cheer that followed was probably heard all over Brooklyn. Luke picked Sarah up and spun her around. Julia started to cry. Charles opened a bottle of sparkling wine that had been saved for emergencies. "We did it!" Luke shouted. "We did it!" Sarah laughed and cried at the same time, being passed from hug to hug by the team. It was real. It had truly happened. She hadn't just survived the evaluation. She had triumphed. An hour later, when the kitchen was finally closed and cleaned, Sarah went up to the apartment still, in shock. Mrs. Johnson was on the sofa with Michael, who was sleeping soundly. "So, how was it?" she asked anxiously. 5 stars, Sarah said, and began to laugh. "Mrs. Johnson, he gave 5 stars, and said it was one of the most exciting meals in 5 years. "I knew it." Mrs. Johnson got up, embracing Sarah tightly. "I knew you would rock it, girl. Your grandmother would be so proud." After Mrs. Johnson left, Sarah was alone with Michael. She carefully picked up the baby so as not to wake him and went to the window. Down below, she saw the nighttime hustle and bustle of the city. Cars passing, people walking, life pulsating tirelessly. Her phone vibrated. It was Luke. "I just spoke with the critic. He called me personally to congratulate you on the extraordinary discovery. Sarah, you made history today. I can't wait to celebrate. L." Sarah smiled, holding the phone against her chest with one hand while the other held Michael. For a moment she allowed herself to just feel pure joy, untainted by fear or insecurity. She had made it. Against all odds, against all the voices that said she wasn't good enough, she had proven her worth, and no one could ever take that away from her. "Did you hear that, little Michael?" she whispered to the sleeping baby. "Your mom made history today, and this is just the beginning." But as the euphoria of the night began to calm, Sarah knew there was something else she needed to resolve, someone, that was taking up more and more space in her heart. It was time to stop being so afraid. It was time to be as brave in love as she was in her career. It was in time to talk to Luke. Christmas was approaching, bringing that frenetic energy that transformed New York into an even more chaotic city. The streets were filled with colorful lights. Stores played Christmas music on endless loops, and Essence Bistro was completely packed every night since the 5-star review was published. Sarah barely had time to breathe between running a kitchen that now served 100, with clients pouring in every night, taking care of Michael, who at 4 months was already starting to recognize faces and smile at everything, and dealing with the sudden interest from the culinary media. Her days stretched far beyond the reasonable, but it wasn't just work that kept her awake at night. It was David. They had established a curious routine in recent weeks. After service, when the kitchen was clean and the staff was leaving, he would always show up with some excuse. I need to check the inventory. I forgot some documents at the office. I came to check the new fridge. And always, they ended up in her apartment, talking late into the night while Michael slept. They talked about everything: childhood dreams, fears, silly things that made them laugh. David shared stories about building his restaurant empire from scratch, sleepless nights, risky loans, the times he almost gave up. Sarah spoke about Springfield, about helping Grandma Betty with the summer festivals, about the difficult decision to move to New York alone at 21. And with every conversation, every shared laugh, every moment of comfortable silence, Sarah felt the last defenses around her heart crumble like sandcastles at high tide. But there was still fear. Fear of ruining everything. Fear that mixing professional with personal would destroy both. Fear that if things didn't work out, she would lose not only a love, but also a home and a career. Now, on a stifling hot December afternoon, Sarah was in the kitchen preparing a special Christmas menu when her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Sarah Johnson? A professional female voice. My name is Patricia Montero. I'm the editor of the culinary section of the New York Times. We would like to do a special feature on you for the Sunday edition. Sarah almost dropped the knife she was holding. A feature about me? About you, your story, your rise at Essence Bistro. David's review made quite an impact. Our readers want to know the chef behind the food that is making New York talk. I don't know. Sarah felt the familiar panic rising. I'm not good with interviews, and my story is kind of complicated. Exactly why it's interesting, Patricia gently insisted. The culinary scene needs more real stories from real people. Not just chefs who studied in Europe. We need you, Sarah. After another 10 minutes of persuasion, Sarah agreed. The interview would be in 3 days at the restaurant itself. When she hung up, her hands were shaking. Problems? Luke appeared beside her. They're doing a feature on me in the Times. A full-page feature. Luke whistled, impressed. Chef, you're becoming a celebrity. Soon they'll be asking for autographs on the street. I don't want to be a celebrity. Sarah went back to chopping onions with more force than necessary. I just want to cook. Unfortunately, when you're this good, one thing comes with the other. Luke picked up one of the onions to help. But look on the bright side. More visibility for the restaurant, more opportunities for all of us. Sarah knew he was right, but that didn't make it any less scary. That night after service, David showed up as always, but this time he brought a different bag. Not food, but a box wrapped in golden paper. What is this? Sarah asked, letting him into the apartment. An early Christmas gift. David placed the box on the table. You can open it. Sarah carefully removed the paper and found a polished wooden box. Inside was a set of professional knives, not just any set, but handcrafted Japanese knives from the brand she had only seen in specialty magazines. Each blade gleamed under the light, perfectly balanced, with dark carved wooden handles. David, she could barely speak. This must have cost a fortune. Every exceptional chef deserves exceptional tools, he said simply. And before you protest, it's not because I'm your boss. It's because you are important to me. The person, not just the cook. Sarah held one of the knives, feeling the perfect weight, the impeccable balance. Tears began to roll down her face before she could stop them. "Why are you crying?" David stepped closer, concerned. "Did you not like it?" "I loved it. It's perfect." Sarah wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I cry because no one has ever given me something like this, something that shows they really see me, understand me. David, Michael's father, in 5 years never gave me anything that meant something real. And you—" She paused, her voice faltering. "And what about me?" David asked softly, so close now that she could feel his warmth. "And you see me?" Sarah finally met his gaze. "For real. You see who I am, what I love, what scares me. And you don't try to change or mold me, you just are here, always here. Because I don't want to be anywhere else." David raised his hand, hesitated for a second, then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Sarah, I know you asked for time, and I gave it. But I need you to know, I haven't changed my mind, and I won't. What I feel for you has only grown, every day a little more." Sarah felt her heart race, her breath quicken. This was the moment. She could retreat again, hide behind fear, or she could take the most terrifying leap of faith of her life. "Me too." The words came out in a whisper. "I've fallen for you, David, and I fought against it. I swear I fought, because I was terrified. I still am, actually. But being without you scares me more than being with you." The smile that lit up David's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. He held her face in his hands with a gentleness that contrasted with the strength he knew he possessed. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and Sarah loved that he asked instead of assuming. "Please," she whispered. The kiss started soft, almost shy, lips meeting carefully, exploring, discovering. But it quickly deepened, months of unspoken tension and desire finally finding expression. David's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer. Hers climbed to his neck, fingers intertwining in his hair. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless, goofy smiles on their faces. "That," Sarah began, "was amazing," David finished, his forehead resting against hers. "And long overdue." Sarah laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. Years, perhaps. "So we are doing this? Even with everything complicated?" "Especially because it's complicated." David kissed her forehead. "But let's take it slow, at your pace. You don't have to tell anyone. Yet if you don't want to, nothing has to change. Just let me be part of your life, yours and Michael's, for real." "You already are." Sarah pointed to where Michael was sleeping in the crib. "He smiles at you more than anyone else." "Because I'm irresistible," David joked, and Sarah playfully pushed him. They sat on the sofa and for the first time allowed themselves the luxury of casual touch, her head resting on his shoulder, his hand resting on her thigh, fingers intertwined. "David," Sarah said after a few minutes of comfortable silence. They're going to do a feature on me in the New York Times, a big full-page one." She felt him tense up. "And you're nervous about it." "Terrified," Sarah admitted. "They're going to ask about everything, my story, how I got here, and I don't know if I want to lay it all bare. The pregnancy, David, being on the street looking for food, it feels humiliating." David shifted to look at her properly. There's nothing humiliating about your story, Sarah. There's survival, there's strength, there's dignity maintained against all odds. And if you share that, it will inspire others who are going through what you went through. Or they'll judge me, say I was foolish, that I deserved what happened. Some people will think that because they're bad people, David said firmly. But many more will look at you and see hope, see that it's possible to rebuild. And that, Sarah, that's worth any idiotic judgment from people who don't matter. Sarah considered his words. He was right. Maybe her story could help someone. Maybe vulnerability was a form of strength too. "Will you stay with me during the interview?" she asked. "If you want, I'll stay with you until the end of the world." 3 days later, journalist Patricia Johnson arrived at Essence Bistro with a photographer and a warm smile. She was a woman in her 40s, curly hair tied back in a ponytail, attentive eyes that seemed to capture every detail. "Chef Sarah, thank you for agreeing to this." They shook hands. "Can we talk in the kitchen? I think it feels more authentic." Sarah agreed, leading them to her territory. David stayed discreetly close, reviewing stocks, but clearly available if she needed him. "So, Sarah, tell me, how did you get here?" Patricia began, recorder on between them. And Sarah told her. For the first time to someone outside her intimate circle, she opened up completely. She spoke about David and the betrayal, about the lonely pregnancy, about the night that changed everything when she begged for scraps of food. She talked about David offering not charity, but dignity through work, about learning to be a mother and a chef at the same time, about the constant fear of not being good enough. Patricia listened without interrupting, only asking occasional questions that delved even deeper, and when Sarah finished, she saw tears in the journalist's eyes. "I'm sorry." Patricia wiped her eyes. "It's just that your story is exactly what we need to hear, not stories of chefs who had everything easy, but of real people, struggling, overcoming. That's inspiring." "I hope so," Sarah said honestly, "because if one person goes through what I went through and sees that it's possible to come out the other side, then it was worth laying it all bare." The photographer asked to take some pictures, Sarah working in the kitchen, holding Michael, who Mrs. Johnson brought for the occasion, even one with David that he insisted was just documenting the professional partnership, although his eyes said otherwise. When the newspaper team finally left, Sarah collapsed into a chair, emotionally exhausted. "How are you?" David crouched beside her chair. "I don't know. Relieved? Terrified? Both?" Sarah held his hand. "But it was good. It was liberating in a way, to stop carrying everything alone." "You'll never have to carry alone again." David kissed her hand. "I promise." The feature came out the following Sunday, taking up 2 full pages in the food section. The headline read, "From the Streets to the Stars, How Sarah Johnson is Revolutionizing New York Cuisine." Sarah read with her heart in her throat, David beside her on the sofa, Michael playing with a rattle on the rug. The journalist had captured everything, the pain, the struggle, the triumph. But more than that, she had captured the essence of what Sarah was trying to do, bringing back the soul to fine dining. "It's perfect," David said when she finished reading. "You're perfect." Sarah's phone began to ring incessantly. Messages, calls, emails. Some were from other chefs offering support, others from people sharing their own stories of struggle. There was even a message from a former colleague from the restaurant saying, she always knew Sarah would go far. But there was a message that made Sarah's blood run cold. "I saw the article. Congratulations on your success. Can we talk about Michael?" "David." Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. David. The father of Michael, who had disappeared over a year ago, the man who destroyed her and left her. And now, just when everything was finally falling into place, he was back. What's wrong? David immediately noticed the change in her expression. Sarah, what happened? Sarah showed him the message, her hand trembling. David read, "It," and she saw his jaw tighten, his eyes darken. "He has no right," David said, his voice low but filled with anger. "He abandoned you. He can't just show up now." "But he is Michael's biological father." Sarah felt panic rising. "What if he wants rights? What if he tries to take Michael from me? What if—" Hey! David held her face, forcing her to look at him. "Breathe. None of that is going to happen. We'll deal with this together, okay? You're not alone this time." Sarah nodded, trying to believe that, but the fear she felt upon seeing that message was primal, absolute. Just when everything was finally coming together, the past was coming back to haunt her. And this time, it wasn't just her heart at risk. It was Michael. It was everything she had built. It was a life that finally seemed worth living. Sarah didn't respond to David's message. For 3 days, she simply pretended it didn't exist, burying herself in work and trying to ignore the knot of anxiety that grew in her stomach with each passing hour. But on Wednesday night, as she was closing the kitchen, he appeared. She saw him through the restaurant's glass door, standing on the sidewalk, hands in the pockets of a leather jacket she didn't recognize. David looked different, thinner, with stubble, something defeated in his posture that contrasted with the arrogance he used to display. Sarah's heart raced, not with longing, but with a toxic mix of anger and fear. Luke noticed her state and followed her gaze. "Who is that?" "The father of Michael," Sarah said, her voice tense. Luke immediately stiffened. "Do you want me to call David or get him out of here?" "No!" Sarah straightened her shoulders, forcing herself to breathe. "I need to deal with this, but stay close, please. I'm not going anywhere." Luke crossed his arms, positioning himself strategically where he could intervene quickly if necessary. Sarah walked out the side door, approaching David slowly. He saw her and tried to muster a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hi, Sarah." The nickname that used to be affectionate now sounded like nails on a chalkboard. "What do you want, David? I saw the, article in the paper." He took a step toward her, but Sarah didn't move. "You look amazing. You achieved everything we dreamed of." "What I dreamed of," Sarah corrected, her voice harsh. "You dreamed of easy money. That's why you took everything and left me pregnant and broke." David had the decency to look ashamed. "I know I messed everything up, and I'm sorry, Sarah. Every day I'm sorry. It was the worst decision of my life." "Don't call me Sarah," Sarah said coldly. "You lost that right when you abandoned me. Now answer. What do you want?" "I want to meet my son," David said, and there was something genuine in the desperation of his voice. "I want to be in his life. I know I don't deserve it. I know I was a jerk. But he's my son too, Sarah. I have the right to—" "Right?" Sarah let out a humorless laugh. "You think you have rights? Where was that right when I was pregnant and living on the street? Where was it when Michael was born and I went through labor alone? Where was it when he cried for the first time, when he smiled for the first time, when I spent sleepless nights taking care of him alone?" David flinched at each word as if they were physical blows. "I know I was a coward, but I've changed, Sarah. I lost everything. The money ran out quickly. The friends I thought I had disappeared. I was alone and realized what I threw away. You, the family we could have been. I want to fix this. Some things can't be fixed." Sarah felt tears of anger burning, but she refused to let them fall. "And you can't just show up now that my life is going well and demand a part of it. Michael doesn't need you. We don't need you." "But I need him," David said, and now there were tears in his eyes too. "Please, Sarah, just let me meet him, that's all. I'm not asking to come back into your life. Just Let me be a father." Sarah was about to respond when she felt a presence behind her. David had come out of the restaurant and was now beside her, not touching her, but so close that she could feel his warmth as an anchor. "Is there a problem here?" David asked, his voice polite, but with a layer of steel beneath. David looked from Sarah to David, and something changed in his expression. "So, this is the guy." There was bitterness in his voice now. "The one who saved you." "I read the article. The good-hearted businessman who pulled you out of misery." "Watch how you talk to her." David stepped forward, partially placing himself between Sarah and David. "Or what?" David let out a bitter laugh. "Are you going to hit me? Are you going to get me out of here? I'm Michael's biological father. I have legal rights, you know. I can file a lawsuit in court, request a paternity test, demand visitation rights. And you'll have to explain to a judge why you abandoned your mother and child, taking her savings." David replied calmly. "Why you didn't pay a dime in child support. Why you had no contact all this time. Good luck with that." Ricardo turned red with anger. "You don't know anything about me and her. You don't know our past, our history. You're just a rich guy playing hero to feel better." "Enough." Sarah positioned herself between the two men. "David, do you want to be in Michael's life? Then you'll have to do it the right way, through lawyers, through formal agreements, not showing up here making veiled threats and demanding things. If you really have changed, if you really want to be a father, prove it. Prove it with actions, not empty words. You can't stop me from seeing my son," David insisted, but there was desperation in his voice now, not anger. "I can, for now I can." Sarah kept her voice steady. "Because you're not on his birth certificate, because you haven't contributed financially, because under the law, at this moment, you are nothing to Michael. But if you want to change that, get a lawyer, sort out the situation, and we can talk about supervised visitation. Until then, I don't want you near me or my son." David looked at her for a long moment, then at Raphael, then back at her. "You're different," he finally said, and it didn't sound like a compliment. "Tougher, colder." "You made me this way," Sarah replied simply. "Now go away." David stood still for a few more seconds, then nodded slowly and turned to leave, but he stopped after a few steps. "I will fight for him, Sarah," he said without turning around, "because it's the only right thing I have left to do, and you will see that I have changed." After he disappeared around the corner, Sarah felt her legs weaken. Raphael immediately caught her, helping her lean against the restaurant wall. "You were amazing," he said, brushing her hair from her face. "Strong, firm, exactly how you needed to be." "I don't feel strong," Sarah admitted, trembling. "I feel terrified. What if he really sues? What if a judge grants him rights?" "Then we deal with it." Raphael held her face, forcing her to look at him. "But Sarah, listen. He abandoned you. The court takes that into consideration. And besides, I have the best lawyers in New York. I will protect you. I will protect Michael. I promise." Sarah nodded, wanting to believe, but the fear was still there, cold and persistent. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to Michael breathe in the crib beside her, thinking of all the worst-case scenarios. David showing up and taking Michael by force, a judge granting joint custody, having to see the man who destroyed her every week for years. At 3 a.m, she gave up trying to sleep. She picked up Michael, who woke up crying as if sensing his mother's anguish, and went down to the restaurant kitchen. Sometimes cooking was the only thing that calmed her mind. She was making cheese bread, the mechanical motions of mixing, kneading, shaping, when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Raphael appeared, hair tousled, wearing only sweatpants and a t-shirt. "Can't sleep?" he asked. though the answer was obvious. I keep thinking of all the ways this could go wrong. Raphael approached, taking Michael from her arms effortlessly. The baby immediately calmed down, snuggling against his chest. "Sarah, look at me." Raphael waited for her to meet his eyes. "David is not going to take Michael from you. Not while I'm alive, and I have resources, money, lawyers, connections. I will use all of that to protect you." "But what if it's not enough?" Her voice came out small, vulnerable. "What if the court decides that a father, even a terrible father, has more rights than a mother who has done everything alone? Then we appeal, we fight, we don't give up." Raphael adjusted Michael in his arms with one hand and used his free hand to wipe away a tear that had rolled down Sarah's face. "But I need you to trust me. Trust that I won't let anything bad happen to you both." Sarah looked at him. This man who had entered her life 6 months ago so unexpectedly, who had seen her in the worst possible situation and offered dignity instead of charity, who held her son as if he were his own, who loved her in a way she was just beginning to believe was real. "I trust you," she finally said. "I trust you more than anyone I've ever known." Raphael smiled, that gentle smile he reserved only for her and Michael. "Then come here." He adjusted Michael between them and pulled Sarah into a hug. "We will get through this together, the three of us." They stayed like that for long minutes. An improvised family in the middle of a professional kitchen at 3 in the morning, a baby sleeping between them, the smell of cheese bread in the oven, and New York silent outside. "Raphael," Sarah murmured against his chest. "I love you." It was the first time she had said it out loud. "I love you in a way that scares me because I don't want to live without you anymore." She felt his body tense with surprise, then relax completely. "I love you too." He kissed the top of her head. "And you won't have to live without me. Never. I promise." The oven timer beeped. Sarah pulled away. Reluctantly, David reached for the cheese bread. Perfect, golden, fragrant. He placed Michael back in the makeshift crib they had set up down there for such occasions. They ate warm cheese bread in the silence of the empty kitchen, hands intertwined over the stainless steel counter, and in that moment, despite all the uncertainties of the future, Sarah allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would turn out all right in the end. 2 days later, David indeed filed a lawsuit seeking recognition of parentage and visitation rights. Sarah received the notification from a court officer on a Saturday morning and had to sit down to avoid fainting. David immediately contacted his lawyers. Dr. Christine Anderson was a woman in her 50s with completely white hair styled in an elegant bun and a fierce reputation in family law. "Let me be clear about one thing," she said in the first meeting, which took place in Sarah's apartment with Michael in her lap. "David has the right to seek recognition of parentage, and if the DNA confirms it, he will have obligations. Primarily retroactive child support since the birth." "But what about visitation?" Sarah asked, fear evident in her voice. "That depends." Dr. Christine flipped through the papers. "The judge will consider several factors: abandonment during the pregnancy, lack of financial support, the length of absence, and most importantly, the best interest of the child. A 4-month-old baby does not need unsupervised visitation with someone he does not know. If the judge grants anything, it will be supervised, likely just a few hours a week in a neutral location." Sarah felt a minimum of relief. "And there's more." Dr. Christine leaned forward. "By law, you can seek compensation for moral and material damages related to the abandonment. The money he took, the expenses of the pregnancy and delivery that you bore alone, even emotional distress for effective abandonment. We can counterattack strongly." "I don't want his money," Sarah said immediately. "I just want to protect Michael." "I understand. But sometimes showing that we are willing to go all out makes the other party back down." Dr. Christine looked at David. "And if I'm not mistaken, you have the resources to keep this in court for years, if necessary." "As many years as it takes," David confirmed. "Sarah and Michael are my absolute priority." Dr. Christine observed the two with that clinical gaze of someone who has seen many cases. "Are you a couple?" Sarah and David exchanged a look. "Yes," David answered when Sarah hesitated. "Then I need to mention something important." Dr. Christine took notes. "If you plan to formalize this union, marriage for example, it significantly strengthens Sarah's position. It shows family stability, structure, and David could eventually adopt Michael, which would provide even more legal security." Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. Marriage, adoption, it was all happening too fast, too intense. "You don't have to decide anything now." Dr. Christine noticed her panic. "These are just options to consider for the future. For now, let's focus on responding to his lawsuit and ensuring Michael stays safe." After the lawyer left, Sarah and David sat in silence for long minutes. "She mentioned marriage," Sarah finally said. "She did," David confirmed carefully. "And would you consider it? Someday?" David turned to face her completely, taking her hands. "Sarah, I would marry you tomorrow if you wanted. Not for legal strategy, not to impress a judge, but because I can't imagine my future without you and Michael in it." He paused, choosing his words. "But I also know it's early. I know you need time to fully trust. And that's okay. I'm not in a hurry. I just know." Sarah felt tears in her eyes again. She had been crying a lot lately, but it was different now. These weren't tears of despair. They were something like hope mixed with fear of believing that good things could actually happen. "Ask me again in a few months," she finally said, "when all of this with David is resolved. When I can breathe properly again, ask me, and maybe I'll be ready to say yes." The smile that lit up David's face was like the sun rising. "Maybe that's good enough for now." He pulled her into a hug. "Maybe that's more than enough." 4 months passed like a whirlwind of legal battles, busy shifts, at the restaurant, and a relationship deepening every day despite, or perhaps because of, all the external challenges. It was April now, fall approaching with its golden afternoons and cooler nights, and Sarah barely recognized the woman she was a year ago. The hearing regarding Michael's parentage was scheduled for that afternoon, and Sarah woke up with a knot in her stomach that even David's comforting embrace couldn't completely undo. They had spent the night together, something that had become routine in recent weeks, although David still officially lived in his apartment in the gardens. "How are you?" David asked, watching her put on a navy blue suit that Beatrice had insisted on lending for the hearing. "Terrified," Sarah admitted, struggling with the zipper of the dress. Her fingers were trembling too much. David stepped up behind her, gently zipping up the dress, and then wrapping her in an embrace from behind. "Dr. Christine said the judge is on our side. The social worker's report was extremely favorable. David has nowhere to turn compared to the stability you have built." Sarah knew that was true. In recent months, a social worker had visited their apartment 3 times, observing Sarah with Michael, interviewing people close to them. The final report, which Dr. Christine had shared yesterday, was almost embarrassingly complimentary. Dedicated and competent mother, stable and loving family environment, well cared for child. It is evidently happy, presence of a reliable and present father figure. This last line about David made Sarah cry, because it was true. David had become Michael's father in every way except biology. He was the one who woke up when the baby cried at night. He was the one who sang off-key but sincere lullabies. He was the one who celebrated every new milestone as if he were a first-time dad. What if the judge grants visitation to David? Sarah turned in his arms. What if Michael grows up confused about who his father is? Michael will know who his father is, David said with conviction. He will know who was there every night, who changed diapers, who taught him to eat baby food. DNA does not define parentage, Sarah. Presence does. A sharp cry cut through the moment. Michael, now 8 months old and getting smarter every day, was waking up in the crib. David went to him automatically, picking him up with that casual competence of someone who had done it 1,000 times. "Good morning, champ." He kissed the baby's chubby cheek. "Today is an important day. We are going to the courthouse to help your mum win a battle." Michael responded with a gurgling laugh, grabbing David's nose with his tiny hands. Sarah watched the scene, her son and the man she loved, and felt something solidify within her. A certainty that had been growing for months. She knew what she needed to do. She knew she was ready. The family courthouse was a grey, bureaucratic building that smelled of old paper and anxiety. Sarah held Michael in her arms so tightly that the baby began to fuss. David gently loosened his grip, running his hand in comforting circles on her back. Dr. Christine met them at the entrance, impeccable in her black suit. "Ready? David is already in there with his lawyer." She lowered her voice. "And between us, the lawyer seems to be one of those cheap ones who take any case. He is not prepared." They entered the hearing room, a small claustrophobic space with beige walls and harsh fluorescent lighting. David was sitting next to a man in a wrinkled suit who looked like he had just graduated from college. When he saw Sarah enter with Michael, David stood up automatically. He looked different again, cleaner, more put together. New suit, freshly cut hair, shaved beard, clearly trying to make a good impression, but it was his eyes that made Sarah stop. There was genuine regret there, and something resembling desperation. "Sarah," he began, but Dr. Christine interrupted him with a firm gesture. "No direct contact before the hearing. Please." The judge entered, a man in his 60s, completely bald, reading, glasses hanging from his neck, Judge Dr. Mark Thompson, according to the plaque on his desk. "Good morning, everyone. Case number 2875, 2025, David Thompson versus Sarah Johnson regarding parentage and custody." He flipped through the papers. "I have read the entire case, including the social worker's report. We will start with the testimony of the petitioner. Mr. David, please approach." David stood up, visibly nervous. His lawyer asked some basic questions. Confirmation of identity, confirmation of the previous relationship with Sarah. "Mr. David, why did you wait 8 months to acknowledge parentage?" the judge asked, removing his glasses to look directly at him. David swallowed hard. I made a terrible mistake, Your Honor. I panicked when Sarah got pregnant. I thought I wasn't ready to be a father. I took the money we had saved and ran like a coward." His voice trembled. "But every day since then, I regret it. I lost everything, the money, my self-respect, the woman I loved. And when I saw the article about Sarah in the newspaper, when I saw the picture of Michael, I realized I had lost my son too. And what has changed now that makes you think you can be a father?" The judge continued, relentless. "I have changed," David said, and there was genuine conviction there. "I went to therapy. I am working again. I rented a small but decent apartment. I am not asking for custody. I am not asking to take Michael away from Sarah. I just want to be in his life. I want him to know he has a father who regrets it, who wants to do the right thing now." "A little late to do the right thing, don't you think?" the judge observed dryly. David lowered his head. "Yes, Your Honor, It is late, but better late than never. Michael deserves to know he was not rejected, that his father wants him, even having been a complete idiot at first. The judge dismissed David and called Sarah. She passed Michael to David, who was sitting in the audience, and approached the stand with trembling legs. Dr. Christine asked the rehearsed questions: confirmation of the pregnancy, abandonment, the difficulties faced. Sarah answered in a firm voice, without dramatizing, just the facts. "Miss Sarah." The judge leaned forward. "You there." He pointed to David. "What is his relationship with this child?" Sarah took a deep breath. "David Thompson is my partner and the most present person in Michael's life since he was born. He was in the delivery room, woke up for all the nighttime feedings, taught Michael to sit, to play. For all practical purposes, he is Michael's father." "I understand." The judge took notes. "And how do you feel about allowing visitation from the biological father?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "I am afraid, Your Honor. Afraid that David will disappear again and break Michael's heart when he is old enough to understand. Afraid that his presence will confuse my son about who was really there for him." She paused, struggling with her emotions. "But I also understand that Michael has the right to know his biological origins. If you determine visitation..." Sarah took a deep breath and said, "I will comply with the supervised visitation, but I need guarantees that David won't disappear again and leave my son waiting for someone who doesn't show up." The judge nodded, appearing satisfied with her response. He dismissed Sarah and spent long minutes reading the documents in front of him. The silence in the room was suffocating. "Very well," he finally said. "Here is my decision. First, I acknowledge the paternity of David Thompson over Michael Johnson, conditioned on confirmation by DNA, which must be conducted within 30 days. Second, David will have to pay retroactive child support from the date of birth, amounting to 40% of the minimum wage, plus a monthly support of 40% of what he earns from now on." David paled at the figures but nodded. "Third," the judge continued, his voice growing more severe, "regarding visitation, here is my position. You, Mr. David, abandoned mother and child at their most vulnerable moment. You took their money and vanished. That is not fatherly behavior, it is criminal behavior." David lowered his head, ashamed. "However," the judge looked at Michael, who was happily playing in Raphael's lap, "that child has the right to know his biological father if the father is willing to behave as such. Therefore, I grant supervised visitation, 2 hours on Sundays, in a neutral location designated by the social worker. This will last for 6 months. If you, Mr. David, attend all visits, demonstrate genuine commitment and stability, we can review for unsupervised visitation. If you miss without documented medical justification, you lose the right to see the child. Is that clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," David replied, his voice choked. "And one more thing." The judge removed his glasses, looking directly at David. "I have seen many biological fathers in this room who think DNA is enough. It is not. Fatherhood is waking up in the middle of the night, changing diapers, being present on the bad days. Mr. Raphael there is doing the work you should be doing. If I were you, I would use these 6 months not to compete with him, but to learn from him. Because if you continue to be selfish, you will lose your child for the second time, and this time it will be forever. Understood?" "Understood, Your Honor," David said, discreetly wiping his eyes. The judge slammed the gavel. "Case closed. The secretary will provide the operational details. Next case." Sarah could barely process what had happened. Dr. Christine guided her out of the room, with David right behind her with Michael. "You won," the lawyer said when they were in the hallway. "Minimal, supervised visitation with strict clauses. It was the best possible outcome." Sarah nodded, still in shock. Then she saw David in the hallway, alone, his cheap lawyer having already left. He looked at her, at Michael, and there was so much pain in his eyes that Sarah almost felt pity. Almost. She approached him, David by her side as always. "David," she said calmly, "if you really have changed, if you truly want to be in Michael's life, prove it. Show up for the visits. Be consistent. Be reliable. Because my son deserves better than empty promises." "I will," David said, and it sounded like a promise. "I swear I will. I won't let him down again. Not, you either." "It's not about disappointing me," Sarah corrected. "It stopped being about us a long time ago. It's about him," she pointed to Michael. "Remember that." David nodded, his eyes fixed on the baby who was holding one of Raphael's fingers and laughing. "He's beautiful," David whispered, "and he looks happy." "He is happy," Raphael said, speaking directly to David for the first time, "and he will continue to be. If you add happiness to his life, great. But if you bring pain, I will personally ensure that you disappear forever. Are we clear?" The threat was not veiled. David looked at Raphael, the man who was raising his biological son, and something complex passed over his face. Jealousy, respect, resignation. "Understood," he finally said, "and thank you for being there when I wasn't. He was lucky to have you." Raphael did not respond, just nodded once. Then he guided Sarah out of the courthouse, leaving David behind. That night, after putting Michael to bed, Sarah and David sat on the couch in the apartment, the same apartment that a year ago was just an empty storage space and now was a complete home. "How are you feeling?" David asked, fingers intertwined with hers, relieved, exhausted, and strangely at peace. Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. "I think part of me was expecting the worst. I was afraid the judge would take Michael away from me or grant shared custody, but it was, fairer than I would have been." "You were amazing in there," David kissed the top of her head. "Strong, but not cruel. Honest about your fears, but willing to do the right thing for Michael. I learned from you." Sarah adjusted to look at him. "About how strength doesn't mean being tough, about how to protect without suffocating." David smiled, that soft smile that was only for her. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Always." He took a deep breath, and Sarah saw genuine nervousness in his eyes, something rare in such a confident man. "Do you remember when Dr. Christine mentioned marriage a few months ago?" Sarah's heart raced. "I remember. And you said to ask you again when everything with David was resolved." David took both of her hands. "Well, it is resolved. Not perfectly. It will never be perfect. But it is as resolved as it can be." Sarah felt tears begin to form. But this time they were completely happy. "David." "Wait, let me speak." He squeezed her hands. "Sarah Johnson, you entered my life on the most improbable night. It was possible. And since then, every day with you has been a discovery of who I can be when I'm with the right person. You reminded me why I started all this. You made me want to be better. You gave me a family I never knew I needed." He paused, his voice choked with emotion. "I don't have a ring right now. I didn't prepare a romantic proposal in a fancy restaurant. But I am absolutely sure that I want to spend the rest of my life waking up next to you, raising Michael together, building something real and lasting. So, will you marry me? Not for legal strategy, not for convenience, but because I can't imagine a future without you in it." Sarah was openly crying now, tears streaming down her face without any attempt to hide them. "Yes." The word came out in a sob of joy. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." David pulled her in for a deep, passionate kiss, full of promises of the future they would build together. When they broke apart, both were laughing and crying at the same time. "I'm going to buy the most beautiful ring there is," David promised, wiping her tears away. "We'll throw an amazing party, invite everyone, or we can run away and just marry the three of us if you prefer. Anything, everything, whatever you want." "I just want you," Sarah said simply. "You, Michael, and me. The rest is detail." A cry came from the crib. Michael had woken up, as if sensing that something important was happening. David went to him, picking him up in his arms. "Hey, champ, guess what? I'm going to marry your mom, and I'm going to be officially your dad. What do you think?" Michael responded by grabbing David's nose and laughing, which everyone agreed was clearly an enthusiastic approval. They stayed up late that night, making vague plans for the future amidst laughter, kisses, and caring for a baby who seemed determined not to sleep. And when finally all three were lying down, Michael between them in bed, a small warm body breathing softly, Sarah found herself staring at the ceiling, thinking about how life could change so completely in such a short time. A year ago, she was searching for food in dumpsters, pregnant and desperate, thinking she had lost everything. And now she was here with a healthy child, a fulfilling career, and about to marry the man who had seen her when she was invisible. "David?" she whispered in the dark. Thank you for giving me a chance that night, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, for loving not just me, but Michael too." David reached out his hand over Michael, intertwining his fingers with hers. "Thank you for letting me be a part of this, for trusting me after everything you've been through, for teaching me that family isn't just blood, it's a choice. It's waking up every day and choosing to be present." "I choose you," Sarah said. "Every day, forever, I choose you." "And I choose you both," David replied. "My family, my home, my everything." And there, in that apartment above a restaurant on Avenue of the Americas, three people brought together by fate in the most unlikely way, slept peacefully, cradled by the promise of a future built on foundations of true love, mutual respect, and the certainty that, together, they could weather any storm. Epilogue. 6 months later, Sarah's second restaurant, because she insisted it be hers, not just another branch of David's, was about to open. It was located in Brooklyn, in a renovated historic brownstone, painted bright yellow like the apartment she had transformed into a home. The name, painted in elegant letters on the facade, Betty's Soul Food. Sarah was at the makeshift altar in the restaurant's indoor garden, wearing a simple white lace dress, with Michael, now 1 year and 3 months old, and already trying to take wobbly steps, in Mrs. Johnson's arms in the front row. David looked handsome in a navy suit, his eyes misty as she walked towards him, to the sound of a guitar playing softly. Beatrice stood next to him as the maid of honor, Dr. Christine in the audience, along with the entire Essence team. And there, in the back, standing discreetly, was David's father. He had been visiting regularly for 6 months, always punctual, always respectful. He wasn't yet a father in the full sense, but he was trying, and Sarah had learned that sometimes genuine effort was enough. The officiant, different from the one at the courthouse, younger and smiling, began the ceremony. "We are here to unite Sarah Johnson and David Thompson in marriage." Sarah barely heard the rest. She was looking at David, at the man who had saved her by offering dignity instead of charity, who had loved her on good days and bad, who had become the father of her child as if he always had been. "You may kiss the bride." The kiss was interrupted by Michael shouting, "Mommy! Daddy!" His first words, chosen for that perfect moment, as if he knew it was important. The celebration that followed was loud, chaotic, perfectly imperfect. Luke and the team prepared a feast, using recipes that Sarah and David had developed together. The cake was cornbread with guava paste, of course. When night fell and the guests began to leave, Sarah and David found themselves alone in the garden, Michael sleeping in her arms. "So, Mrs. Thompson," David wrapped her in a hug. "How do you feel?" "Like I've finally come home," Sarah replied honestly. "After a long, long journey, I've finally come home." "And what a journey." David kissed her forehead, then Michael's. But it was worth every step, every tear, every struggle. It was all worth it to get here. "I agree." Sarah looked around, the restaurant named after Grandma Betty, the garden decorated with flowers, people who became family. "And you know what's even better? This is just the beginning. A whole life ahead," David repeated, smiling, "and I can hardly wait for every second of it." And there, under the starry sky of New York, a woman who a year ago begged for scraps of food now had everything: love, family, purpose, and the unwavering certainty that she deserved every ounce of happiness she had built with her own hands, because in the end, Sarah learned the most important lesson of all. Asking for help is not weakness when you truly need it. Accepting love is not defeat when that love respects who you are. And rebuilding life from the rubble doesn't mean you were weak before. It means you are strong enough to recognize when you need to start over. And sometimes, just sometimes, when you're at the bottom of the pit, looking for something to survive another day, the universe conspires to give you not just survival, but a chance to truly live. And Sarah, finally, was truly living.